and pretty easy digging. I was wondering, would there be blasting involved in putting this?
Is they bring in these extraordinarily large trenchers.
Rock saw.
Well, it's not only a rock saw, it's a trencher.
Okay.
And it's, but generally they try to avoid blasting because it's just not as precise as they want to do. They'll probably bring in, it's about the size of a rail car.
Well, that's encouraging, but I can't see getting a 10-foot hole anywhere in this county without any blasting. And that's something we'd feel over the whole county.
Yeah, the geology in South Austin is very, very similar to what we got here. And they were able to do with no blasting. Now, in a rural area, they might, but they just don't get the kind of precision that they like to have.
Okay. And my other question was about what kind of bankroll do they have for when their pipelines begin to separate and fail? When these explosions and these fires and things, all of the accidents, Chuck, that you were telling us about, are they financed so that they can compensate you for your homes and your lives and your land?
It varies. Kinder Morgan is a pretty large firm. They're publicly traded. What happens with a lot of these pipelines is sometimes it happens right after they're built, is they will transfer them to a LLC that the only asset that they have is the pipeline. And now I doubt that may not happen in this case, but they don't have insurance. When they have an accident, they draw on the company's assets, because they use their own cash and pay for it. Accidents have bankrupted a number of pipeline operators where they went under and walked away from their liability. And so that's a concern. It's one of the good things about this project is it is being done by one of the largest pipeline operators in the country. We worry especially with liability and ability to address an accident with the small companies that the only asset that they have is the pipe. That's not the case here.
Okay, thank you.
How you doing? My name is James, and I'm just wondering how many times that pipeline's come across the Blanco River, how they make a pipeline go across the river, and whether or not a flood of the magnitude we had a few years back is going to affect that pipeline and damage it, and then may cause us other damages further down the line.
It's one of the questions I've got, one of the concerns I've got is how many crossings they'll have. Especially rivers like the Blanco, they ought to bore under it outside the erosion hazard zone. Engineers and geologists can calculate what the potential erosion potential is, and they ought to put the pipe well below that. And they ought to bore out under in places more pits on either side of that. That's generally not done. I don't know what the plans are here. Ron, do you have it?
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, again, my name is Ron Fieseler. I'm the general manager of the Blanco-Pedernales Groundwater District here in Blanco County. About 18 years ago or so, there was the Longhorn Pipeline project, and it crossed into northern Blanco County. And I watched the bore under Flat Creek, which is right up on the Blanco-Hayes County line, if you're familiar with that part of the country, just east of Pedernales Falls State Park. I don't remember the exact diameter of the pipeline. I seem to recall it's like 24, 30 inches, something like that. But they still bore a very large hole, and it's all engineered, and it's like directional drilling. They actually drill under the creek and come out far on the other side. And then they get the pipeline all welded up and ready to go, and they have it on these rollers, and it just slides right on under like that. And I've been out there several times since, and I can't even tell that they've done anything to the creek at all. It looks just like it did from years and years ago. So I'm thinking they're going to cross the Blanco River twice according to their current alignment.
Thank you.
So that boring under Flat Creek was a result of the settlement that we negotiated with Longhorn Pipeline. They were not going to bore Flat Creek. I would be shocked if they bored under a single creek along the entire route. It's expensive and it's time consuming. They may do the rivers. That I don't know.
I think it will be just the rivers, yeah. But I don't see any way they can trench across the Blanco River. They got some cliffs to deal with. They're going to bore if they cross the Blanco River. The other creeks, it's going to be just a trench across it. That's correct, I think, Chuck.
Next question. Yes, my question is for Commissioner Weir. I have a concern about the pipeline that's in Blanco County, and in Blanco alone, we have only a volunteer fire department that have to always pay for their own education and their own equipment, basically. So now we have an explosive substance in our midst. Who is going to pay for the training for all of our firemen? And we don't have any that are hazmat qualified. Who's going to pay for their equipment? Who is going to, man all this? Because Blanco will just, it could easily explode. But there's still going to be people around here that are not going to be able to get out. So that is a big concern of mine. And I think that the other thing, what this gentleman was talking about the tax base. Our tax base, if it goes down anywhere 30–40%, okay, then that takes care of our infrastructure and our school taxes. So I'm picking on you right now, but this is my concern about the welfare of our community, and you are a prudent steward of the county. So.
Well, I understand that, and it is. We're a county that doesn't have that big a population. We have less than 12,000 people. A lot of our property is ag exempt in the county. We don't have a commercial tax district or anything like that, like Comell County or Hayes County. So when you look at it, you bet a little drop in the tax value or whatever makes a big difference. It does. When it comes to fire department and how we're going to plan about that, that's where the ESDs come in, your emergency service districts. They're separate taxing entities, and we've got to look at that. We've got to look at the impact of that. The county, as far as they're concerned, they don't govern the ESDs. We look at them; they're their own tax entity. But we do look at their budget proposal every year and help them to finalize it and get it approved. But I do understand what you're saying. If you're going to have it come through here and it changes the risk, then we need to look at it from that point of view. And if that's where, if it ever does come through here, and if they get their way and it comes through here and becomes that, we need to make sure that those revenues are spent in that respect, where they go that direction. If they need to increase the ESDs or whatever they need to do to make damn sure we're playing.
If they're going to give us $900,000 to $1 million a year, that ain't going to cover that cost.
Well, you need to make sure that they don't get it all. They don't get it all. It gets spread out. So everybody that is affected by it is going to have to look at that. Is that going to be enough? I don't know. I don't think so.
Because also firing, how are we going to insure our homes? That'll be prohibitive too.
But we do. We need to. Those are questions we need to ask. You're asking me how to insure your house.
I'm saying to you, we need to get these answers.
Next question.
Yeah.
We have a question on this side of the room. She wants to know if the city or the county had any say in what the route would be with Kinder Morgan. Was there any?
I don't know about the city, but I know in the county we did not. Matter of fact, I heard about it probably not even a month before it came out in the paper that it was going to happen. It shocked me, it surprised me. And I heard it from a constituent that called me and said, hey, they're running a pipeline through my property. And I said, no, they're not. I haven't heard anything about that. 2 days later, I heard about it. So they had already been contacted before I heard about it. And then I started calling around to answer their question and found out there was a proposed pipeline coming through. So it did. It surprised the county. I'm not speaking for the county, but for me, it surprised the heck out of me when I heard about it, that it was that far along. So
I can add to that a little bit. The counties have pretty limited jurisdiction over regulating development under state law. Cities, if you're a home rule city, you do have some authority. Home rule cities, and I don't know if Blanco is big enough, can have limited ability where a new pipeline is located, but it is very limited under state law.
I did want to follow that up too and address the young man's comment who spoke first, and I think he's already left. But in terms of, he mentioned transmission line coming through here and why weren't people up in arms about that? The irony of that is that people do have the opportunity to comment and address the routing of a transmission line through the Public Utility Commission, whereas as the law stands in Texas right now, that is not the case with natural gas transmission lines.
I just think I'd like to point out that neither the county, well, first of all, Kinder Morgan or any pipeline company that has this eminent domain over these pipelines, they don't have to notify the county commissioners, they don't have to notify the cities, they don't have to notify the groundwater district, they don't even have to notify the dog catcher. Basically, it's the state laws that are running this, and the state laws, as someone pointed out, they're very lax right now. And that's really going to be at the legislature. That's where the action is going to be if this is ever going to get changed. It's not any of our fault here, county, city, groundwater districts, whatever. It's just the way that things are set up. They are set up to benefit basically what's called the common carriers, the pipeline companies and electric companies. Over here.
Next question.
My question is also for Commissioner Weir. I asked the question at the beginning about the ad that Kinder Morgan is running in the Blanco County News that says that they will contribute $800,000 plus, I guess it's per year, I don't know, I didn't catch that part, to the economy, to the tax base for Blanco County. And I asked you, did you know where that came from? And I just wondered if, because when I see something like that, I'm skeptical. I think, oh, come on, where's that coming from? What are they paying tax on? Once they paid for the land, what are they paying tax on? So I just wondered if when you saw that, were you skeptical, and are you planning to ask Kinder Morgan to tell us the truth about that?
Well, the reason I can assume that it is a fact is the fact that they're already doing it. There's three pipelines in the north end of the county that have been there for quite a while, and one of them is Kinder Morgan. And they've been paying since the 50s. I don't know about Kinder Morgan, but the pipe companies have been paying the county for the usage across county property since the 50s. And if you want to hear the amount, if I'm not mistaken, it's around $35,000 for those three. They're smaller lines, but they run through the north end of the county. And so that's a fact. That is happening now. So that's where I came up with, yeah, sure, they're going to do that too. Now, how do they get to that number? I don't know if they're calculating the total miles or what it takes to get to that number. I noticed they had it calculated for the other counties in here when they had the other forum here before, and it was based off of how many miles that went through each county. So, and from what I could tell, some of them had a larger number, but they had more miles that they went through. So I don't know how they come up with that figure. I can find out how they came up with it.
That would be great if you could find that out and let your constituents know.
See how you.
We're curious. We're skeptical. Thank you.
What? They pay them, if I understand, they pay them, the three pipelines up there, they pay them every year and a half. That's correct. That's correct. Not necessarily. Know if that's fair or not.
Hey, I'm Debbie Hallmeyer. I'm a real estate broker here. This will have an impact on our property values big time. I was one of the 3,000 realtors at the Capitol fighting for property rights this past week. There are eminent domain bills, 2 of them on the Senate floor, 2 of them on the House floor. And we have to write our congressmen, our state reps, our local, and be a voice, because it does make an impact. So that's my comment. I do have a question. I'm not hearing anything about the effects on our wildlife. If you have a wildlife management plan, you're supposed to be counting the birds, and you're supposed to be doing all this. How can you do that kind of stuff when you have equipment? And the hunters, there's supposed to be an impact on chasing the deer away. So where are the studies on our animals and the hunting that we are known for in the hill country. I've heard nothing. And when I did bring this up with Kinder Morgan, they go, oh, our hunters like the cleared area. That was their answer. I go, really? So, has anybody heard anything about those two things, the hunting and the wildlife programs?
I haven't heard anything. There's potential benefits and potential costs for migratory animals that rely and animals that rely on contiguous forested areas. There are some of the endangered birds. You can't break up their habitat. When you break up their habitat, fractured habitat causes problems for certain types of birds and animals. It's a big issue in Bastrop. It's a big issue in Travis County, Williamson County with endangered birds. Hunters do like to set their stands up where they can shoot down right away because they like to catch the deer coming from one cover to the other cover, and so you do see that a lot. So there are pros and cons, but it does have the potential to really significantly impact natural habitat by fracturing it.
Next question.
Thank you, guys.
Just a second. I want to provide some personal information about that. I spent almost 5 years working in the oil field up in Wyoming, and I worked in what was called wireline work, but I was on lots of oil and gas well locations and watched them lay in miles and miles and miles of pipeline. And it seemed like the animals didn't care very much. I went back up there last September on an antelope hunt, and I chased antelope over old oil well locations and across pipeline tracks and stuff, and the animals didn't care. The antelope didn't, the mule deer, elk, coyotes, jackrabbits, the sage grouse didn't care. It just reverts back to habitat, and I had a lot of fun up there, and so I think the animals will adapt, and I think the ones here in Texas will too, so hopefully that's what will happen.
Thank you. Write those letters though, y'all. It really works.
Yes.
I know a pipe that's running flat and straight has a whole lot less failures than pipe that's doing a bunch of ups and downs. So it seems like maybe they could find some more suitable terrain to trench through. And the numbers that were up on the bulletin earlier showing the failures and the explosions and this and that. It seems like those numbers would go way down. And this may be a straight line, but if they took a longer, flatter route, those numbers would go down and maybe that would offset the length of the trenching. So I don't know if they've ever considered that when they decided the route. Maybe somebody might think about that.
I've never seen any data that correlates accident rate with elevation changes with pipelines. Pipelines all over the country go up and down. There may be, but I've never seen any data that relates the two.
Well, I've only dealt with pressured water, not oil and welded pipes, but I just kind of feel like it might be the same.
My name is John Watson. In 2000, a group of people in Travis County and from actually Baytown to El Paso got in opposition to something called the Longhorn Pipeline. Chuck Lesniak was involved in it as a representative of the city of Austin. At that time, this was a wholly intrastate pipeline, but through a lawsuit filed in the federal court in Austin, in which the city of Austin was a plaintiff and so was LCRA, a settlement was eventually reached that required the pipeline company to do what is called an environmental assessment under the National Environmental Protection Act. And they had to go in and do a study of the risk of everything, and then publish that, and then people like me and all of us had an opportunity to offer comments. The permit, that was a repurposed pipeline. It was an old oil pipeline. They wanted to reverse it and run it uphill to El Paso and put in about 15 or 20 new pumping stations, which are highly risky as well as noisy, and came right through Blanco County, just north of the town of Blanco by the exotic zoo. There's a pipeline easement there that has 3 pipelines in it. It also runs through Pedernales Falls State Park. But we found, the lawyers found what is called a federal nexus. Chuck and I talked about that earlier. What I wonder is, can we put pressure on Kinder Morgan to agree to do what is the functional equivalent of an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement? And at that time, I introduced a resolution or proposed a resolution to the county commissioners of this county, Blanco County, and the Johnson City Council. I've got the resolution here. Both of them adopted a resolution opposing the Longhorn Pipeline permit. And I'm probably going to ask the county commissioners to once again stand up for the people that live here, not the people from Kinder Morgan and Houston.
So the Longhorn Pipeline assessment, that's where I learned more than I ever wanted to know about pipelines. And but that's what ought to happen here. That's what ought to be. That's what ought to be done. Is it was an extremely detailed environmental assessment. It's the way we ought to do pipelines. It resulted in Longhorn Pipeline ripping up 29 miles of pipeline through the hill country. They replaced it. A big chunk of that 29 miles, they encased the entire pipeline in concrete. They put a concrete cap over the top of it. They built containment so that if there was a spill, it would all be contained within the right-of-way. And a bunch of other improvements that we got that should have been part of the project design to begin with, but would not have happened except for that study that was done. Problem is, and this is why Kinder Morgan won't want to do this, is it took almost 5 years and cost them about $15 million. But it's what ought to be done here. There's no question in my mind.
25% Kinder Morgan can afford. They raise their dividend. If they can do that, they can afford to do what is right. Their mission statement, doing what's right. Well, then let's see them fulfill their damn mission statement.
Time is probably the biggest word.
My question is for Chuck also, and I'm just wondering if there is, because of the karst topography that we have here, are there any studies or is there data that shows an increase in risk of leaks or explosions, that kind of thing, because of the, we've got all these sinkholes and caverns, and it seems like when you're going through there and you have a high compression thing that's vibrating all the time, it just seems like it could be more risky.
Yeah, and Ron will probably weigh in on this too. There's some unique issues with putting a pipeline through this kind of geology. One of the things is that you get these voids that are, some of them are real small, maybe the size of my foot, some of them might be the size of this room. And unless you do surveys, non-intrusive surveys, ground penetrating radar and other things ahead of time to try and figure out where those are, they just sort of stumble into them. And it's creating big problems. I know it's creating big problems with the construction of several pipelines up in Pennsylvania where they've got almost the exact same kind of geology that we've got here. Once they're in operation, you can put a pipeline in. You might not encounter the void when you cut the trench, but like that picture I showed you, that void developed underneath the pipeline after it was put in place. So you might put the pipeline in, cut the trench, but maybe you just went across the top of a cave and there was a foot or two of cave roof left there, and over time that erodes away and it collapses and then the pipeline separates. So unless you do the kind of surveys that need to be done ahead of time, you don't know until you actually encounter it. And it does change the kind of risk and potentially increase the risk that you've got with any kind of pipeline. And the other unique thing about karst is, and this is what Matt was talking about, is you have an incredibly rapid connection from the surface or from the source of a spill to the groundwater happens in minutes or in a few hours. It's almost impossible to contain it. With a natural gas pipeline, even though it's a gas, you do have condensates that collect in the line, and you can easily have thousands to tens of thousands of gallons that can spill in the event of a pipeline break, even on a natural gas pipeline. And these are also contaminants that are already in solution in water, so they don't flow. And so it makes them even harder to clean up. And so the volumes are smaller. But if this were to get repurposed to be a crude oil line or a gasoline line or something like that, which is possible at some point in the future, then the risk to groundwater goes even higher in a karst environment.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to try and explain this as simply as I can. First of all, karst is a surface topographical feature. It consists of cavernous areas, honeycombs, cracks, fractures, crevices, things like that. It really has, down in where the aquifer's at, the aquifer is not in the karst per se. The karst is on the surface. Luckily, in this part of Blanco County, what the pipeline route is proposed to go through is primarily what's called Glen Rose limestone. And if you look at it, the hillside, you'll see what looks like a stair-step topography. And if you ever wondered what that is, it's the Glen Rose limestone, and the steps are the hard limestone layers that can be 2 or 3 feet, maybe 4 feet thick, and then the slopes, or let's call it caliche. It's really a clay, limey, sandy marl type thing, but let's call it caliche. That's what everybody knows it by. So probably when they're trenching the pipeline, they're going to run through some of those 2, 3, 4 foot thick limestone layers, and then they'll hit the caliche layer and maybe hit another limestone layer. The groundwater and all the aquifers are way below that. The Glen Rose is not a particularly productive groundwater producer. It does create little seeps and springs and stuff. So that's where a lot of our water comes from in our creeks and so forth. But to actually have an impact on caves, you're going to have to get really deep, 50, 60 feet deep, things like that. I did some checking up and got out some of my old publications. I've been involved in cave exploration since 1964. So I've crawled around in some of the aquifers and got muddy and wet and everything. But Blanco County has about 13 caves in it. There's only 3 of those in the Blanco River watershed, and one of those is about a mile or so from the proposed pipeline route. So I'm pretty comfortable with the situation with their caves in the area. The Glen Rose is not known for caves. It's got a very few in it, like I just mentioned, but we don't have the caves like they do in the Edwards limestone regions, east of here and south of here. So I'm pretty comfortable with the level of protection we're going to have on our surface karst and the aquifers that are anywhere from 50 to 150, 200 feet below the surface. So I think it's going to really be hard to impact on.
Okay, so let me clarify. So you're saying the pipeline will not be trenched through karst?
Well, the karst is on the surface, so
right, but they're saying, 10 feet down. That's surface, isn't it?
Karst can extend further down, but the caliche is not going to produce a karst environment, really. It requires limestone, sandstone, that sort of thing, to generate fractures, crevices, caves, porosity. Like, imagine a petrified sponge, if you will. And I've seen all over the county, I've seen little bits of Glen Rose limestone, and it looks like a petrified sponge. It's got dozens of holes in it.
Right.
And that's part of the surface karst features.
Right. I'm also concerned, I guess, even though maybe our piece in Blanco County seems to be a safe area, it's definitely going through karst all the way through this 4-county, distance. And if any of that topography is compromised by this pipeline, that contaminates all of these aquifers. So even though our little piece might be safer, don't we need to be concerned about the larger route? Because if they could just reroute this around these aquifers in this, high urban density, It seems like it's just safer for everybody.
Well, obviously, we have to be concerned about everything, but it helps to understand the entire picture. For instance, the layers of rock that comprise our hill country in this area generally tilt. Is that better? Tilt from west to east or west to southeast kind of.
Right.
And it's at a very shallow angle, maybe 2 or 3, 4 degrees, something like that. And so water flows downhill. That's why we have a lot of springs along the San Marcos and Barton Springs. And they're on the edge of this escarpment from the hill country meeting the Gulf Coastal Plain. And so the groundwater is affecting everything in that area. And the springs, the little seeps up in Blanco County, and Burke County, and Gillespie County, and Kendall County, they all provide water to Blanco River, the Guadalupe River, and Pedernales River if you want to go further north. So it does pay to pay attention to everything. Now, I can tell you that Western Hays County probably has more caves than we do. I haven't run the count on those yet, but that's a lot more cavernous and a little bit more karst over there, but they have a similar geology. They also have glen rows on the surface. And it's just an eastward extension of Blanco County, but they're going to have to pay attention to their route. And luckily, my groundwater, I met with 3 other groundwater districts. 4 of us met with 5 representatives from Kinder Morgan, and we did a lengthy presentation and an hour-and-a-half long discussion on the issues involving geology, caves, karst, the creeks and rivers and things like this, and they understand the sensitivity of those and how they're all tied together. So, as I understand it, they've hired a geologist to do a survey on the proposed route to look at the geology and the cave and karst situation. So we'll see what comes of that, but at least that's what they're doing. And at least we got a long time with them to explain about our concerns.
So will they be presenting those findings from their karst expert they're hiring to look at the geology here? Are they going to actually do some kind of...
I don't know if they'll do a public presentation, but I'm sure going to do my best to see a copy of it.
Well, I'd sure like to know what they find out about our topography here, because I think they know it's not a safe route.
Well, anything the groundwater district gets in the form of a document or something is public information, so shouldn't be a problem.